After a month-long break, the Dispatch has returned, and we are returning at a very good time considering that CWL Anaheim just concluded. There's a lot to dive into, a lot to break down, and I've got CWL main observer Quentin, aka Paradox, joining me today to discuss it. How are things today, buddy?
Things are good. A bit of a crazy travel day getting back to beautiful Columbus on Monday, but other than that, I'm excited. Anaheim was great. There are a couple things here and there I kind of wish were a little better, but always trying to improve stuff. I'm doing fine. How about you?
I'm doing good, buddy. I was going to say, like, quickly to your point about travel, I was hearing everyone discuss about, like, okay, we are never flying into LAX again. Like, it's just not happening. Like, normally I feel like we hear the issues with, like, the European side, like, oh my gosh, it's so difficult. The flights are so long. But I almost feel as if, like, LAX is becoming one of those events where people don't necessarily dread, because obviously it's Anaheim, right? But at the same time, it's like the traveling can't be fun. What was your experience like?
So one, I don't trust people that fly out of LAX unless they go into actual LA. I always fly Santa Ana because it's closer. I feel like it's just the smarter thing to do. But other than that, is I got to the airport, flight was delayed, thought I was gonna miss my connection, had like a 10-minute window. Luckily, my connection ended up getting delayed. So thankfully, I'm not stuck in Phoenix right now or something. But who knows what would have happened? It was interesting day to say the least, man.
I'm glad to hear you're back. I'm glad that we're obviously, here discussing things because it wouldn't have happened otherwise. But let's break down a few things, right? Coming into Anaheim, I'll be honest with you, I had like maybe three teams that I thought were probably going to win it. Like there wasn't anyone else outside of it where I'll say this. In previous events, normally you can throw out a few different rosters like, oh, hey, this team really realistically has a chance. But in this situation, coming into Anaheim, all things considered, I had three teams who I thought could win a title, and it wouldn't have surprised me if either three would have, kind of walked away with it, which are 100 Thieves, Optic Gaming, and then maybe E United. I was a little bit kind of on the fence about them. Obviously, that showed out to be somewhat correct. But the other teams were just really there. Like, I like FaZe a lot. I just don't think they can kind of swing with the top dogs. They obviously proved that this weekend with constant struggles versus the top teams. Gingy was not looking great in Pro League, as I'm sure you're aware. And then the two main powerhouse teams that people consider to be on paper, LG and Splice, are currently rocking substitutes, just waiting for this roster change period to begin. And then obviously Envy were clearly getting smashed and did so at Anaheim. Now, in your mind, Paradox, were there any more teams that you'd put in that conversation? Maybe one of the rosters that I kind of listed as maybe one that I wasn't the most confident in that, in your eyes, actually had a chance at winning Anaheim?
I feel like everyone's attention was on Optic United 100 Thieves, right? Mostly 100 Thieves was my pick going into the event, so let's go. Me and Maven got the prediction correct, but other than that, I mean, like that's where everyone's focus was. You had some teams like, okay, where's Gen G gonna place? I know a lot of attention was on E6 as Kismet's tweet, but for the most part, there was like a clear separation in everyone's mind. These are the top three teams. Maybe you throw a FaZe in there, but how do they stack up against those three? And for the most part, it looks like things really played out on paper, I guess you could say, other than Envy, which that's a topic and a half on its own.
Yeah, maybe not the most positive one by any means as of this moment, but I'm going to point out the reason why I bring this question up is, and I think this was Nameless's point that he brought up on the analyst desk, and it's so accurate. If any players, if any teams wanted to prove that they don't deserve to be traded during this last effort roster change period, which I have claimed as in like, hey, you don't want to be like coming into this year. You do not want to be making changes at this point, right? Because there's franchising on the horizon. There's also the main problem as well of saying, hey, we have 3 days. We have 3 days to totally revamp our roster. Maybe a change that wants to be made. Like, how confident are we coming into the last, few events of the year? Avoiding this last roster change period is super important. The fact that obviously we're seeing a ton of changes most likely be happening. Obviously, this is recorded a little bit earlier for those who may not be aware. But my biggest thing was, hey, if you don't want to be traded, if you want to prove that you are a talented team that should stick together, this was the event to do so. LG and Splice, you can already write them off. Envy, you can write them off. FaZe, you could argue. Gingy wasn't looking great either coming into the event. So, like I said, I feel like this was a huge opportunity. And in your eyes, Paradox, were there any teams that you thought missed their chance, that missed their mark at proving that they are talented enough to compete for a title?
Uh, I mean, most teams that I would probably put in that category are teams that we thought couldn't win in the first place. Like, no disrespect, you wouldn't say, "Oh, EG is going to come out and win Anaheim," right? Like, it's a solid roster. I think they have a definite sort of peak, though, right? So I don't think any of those teams ended up getting saved. I think Heretics might have been one where it's like, all right, you can sort of stick together. Things looked a bit shaky,
Yeah.
but now Heretics is making a change. So
Right.
like, this is going to be an interesting couple of days. I know that for sure, man.
Yeah, that's without question. I mean, it's definitely interesting. That's for sure. As of this moment, everyone's kind of scatterbraining, and I wasn't really sure what to think. But I'll be honest with you, the one team that I really thought had a super solid chance, one that I mentioned was kind of one of my favorites, was a United. I thought that they had a really good opportunity to at least, and I say at least, but in a good moment, come in second place. I mean, they were for me the team that could really prove a lot. Like, I like the boys on Gingy. I was just worried about their consistency as a team and versus top level respawns. Their kind of game modes have kind of changed up a little bit. But I feel like E United missed their chance. They finished second at London. At that moment, Sims considered to be basically the greatest player of all time already, just off of his first event. And you capitalize on that, possibly by rematching against 100 Thieves, one of which you've probably learned a lot from. Maybe you know their game types more. You try to improve maybe in Search and Destroy, which 100 Thieves unfortunately improved on that a lot coming into this event. That's the reason why many consider them to be the way that they are. They're constantly improving. They're worrying, or rather, they're focusing on their their faults essentially. But like I said, I feel like this was a really good moment for this team to kind of continually show that, hey, we are a top 3, we are a top 2 team, and they don't get there. And like I said, they did lose versus some very solid rosters. I think they lose to Optic and Gingy in the winners and losers side. So obviously talented teams that you lose to, but at the same time, I just feel like they had a really good opportunity in front of them, one of which they could really capitalize on. But we also have to bring up getting into that, kind of top discussion, that top 4 at a major LAN tournament. It's hard to get into. It's a prestigious group to try and get involved with, but I really feel like they had a chance, and like I said, they just couldn't capitalize. But I'll go ahead and say the Shock, because many obviously predicted them to win, much like yourself and I did, Maven did. I mean, everybody pretty much for the most part was looking toward 100 Thieves to possibly go back-to-back, and they did so. They looked fantastic at Anaheim, and obviously they had their close matches, but I even tweeted this, and I tweeted, a team is dominant when people are complaining about how boring the grand finals was. And it's not something that happens very often. I mean, obviously with the Optic Dynasty paradox, it was a matter of everyone was excited because it's Optic. But back whenever it was, the Cole/EG days, people would complain and be like, really? Like, this is the grand final that we're getting after all the hype coming into this event? This is the grand final that happens? We see a hot 3-0 or a hot 3-1, whatever it may be. But when you watch 100 Thieves, what about this team makes them such a force? And obviously, you have the unique ability to watch all their perspectives. You're the one driving everything. You get to watch their map setups, probably know a lot better than many people out there. What separates them enough to not just win one title, but to win back-to-back ones?
I mean, so the first thing people always put out about 100 Thieves is the roster itself. It's a stacked team, right? Like, you have superstars on this team, multiple superstars. But one thing I really like about this team is their passion, their drive. Like, of course, you win a tournament, you can get a little lax, but this is a team that had a set goal. It's like, okay, we need to improve here and there. How do we do that? And then executing on that. Like, there was a lot of talk about their Search and Destroy. I would say definite improvement over the past few weeks, especially coming from London into Anaheim. And just there's a difference with teams that they're like clutch teams. I know you know this, but there are teams that have that second gear that can activate at any time. Obviously, you look at like your Optic, you look at 100 Thieves. United can do that as well, but I feel like it's more stood out with Optic and 100 Thieves. And with 100 Thieves, when that switch clicks, it is just a completely different team. This is a team that knows how to play to the fundamentals. This is a team that has the mechanical skill, that has all the knowledge they need to have. And when they can just come out, hit a switch, and they just look like unstoppable on the map. I mean, how in the world do you deal with something like that? This is a team that they lost, well, I want to say 1, maybe 2 Search and Destroys, 3 maps, like total the entire event, something like that.
Yeah,
like, come on, man. Like, this team is absolutely ridiculous.
Yeah, it was like their kryptonite was like, nope, like the next event not going to happen anymore. It's like they don't seem to really have any like super negatives that are out there. It's just a matter of trying to catch them off guard, maybe meeting them with another really talented lineup, much like Optic was trying to do a few different times. So, like you said, I think the one thing for me that also stands out is their ability, and it kind of relates back to the Search and Destroy, is their ability to improve so rapidly on their faults. Like Search and Destroy, by no means was a solid game mode for them coming in from London. Obviously, it was kind of regarded as one that they have been struggling on throughout the entirety of the year, even with the original roster. But it's almost like they're out to prove to themselves how good that they are. Like, you look at this lineup, and like you said, that's the one main draw that everybody has, myself included, was like, look at these guys on paper. Like, look at these guys all next to each other. Plus, you throw in, Cratter for good measure. You throw in Priesta, who is fantastic in his own regard, is going to work really well with the team. I mean, from a mile away, people could see this is something that's good here, but I almost feel as if they don't want to kind of go down as like a good team. They want to go down as one of the best. And based off their off season, or rather their kind of off tournament time, they seem to be handling it well. Like, they even were putting out yesterday, I think it was Crowder, had made it known that they were worried about complacency already. I love that. That's one of the main things that personally I was a very big person that I harped on, was that, hey, whenever Optic wins their championship, whenever they complete the run of the dynasty, the original one, what happens now? Because they've completed everything. They've done everything that they need to do, and complacency easily will set in. And they've even said that, they've even attested to it now that, obviously the old dynasty has ended. They were even bringing it up, around that time, that, hey, we got complacent. We weren't really confident to really try to prove anything else because we have done everything already. And I think for 100 Thieves, it is a great track to be on, considering what we know from Team Caliber and Rise Nation from last year, both winning back-to-back, and then it kind of just started to fizzle out over time. I think 100 Thieves, I don't know about your opinion on this, Paradox, I feel as if they want to prove to everybody, and even prove to themselves, how good they actually are.
I feel like that's true, and I want to see where that sort of complacency talk and that drive goes now. Like, from London, it was, how can we get better? There's a clear next step. Work on our search and destroy. You come into Anaheim, lose one search and destroy. You lose more hard points than search and destroys for the entire tournament. Something I 100% didn't think it was going to happen.
Right?
But,
Yeah.
who am I? But now it's like, okay, we lost 2 hard points, a control, and a search and destroy. 2 of those were like map breaking records, or like kill records set. So now it's like, okay, what can we improve on? Because like, this is a team that knows fundamentals. I think now is going through certain situations. Okay, when we find ourselves down, what do we have to do? That's sort of the little details and stuff that I really want to see this team get into, because oh man, these guys are a force to be reckoned with for the rest of the title, if not going into the next game.
Yeah, that's for sure. Now, I went out and I just said it on Twitter the other day. I know everyone had their mind on it, and I wanted to kind of clear the air a little bit. This team looks like they could be in the early stages of a dynasty. And of course, whenever anyone says the word dynasty, people freak out, but I don't say that lightly. I'm not one to throw out the word dynasty just at anything, because I really wouldn't do that. I was one who was very, critique heavy on like the Cole versus OG comparisons, which we're not going to get into because that would be like a 4-hour podcast type thing. But everyone still considers Impact from Black Ops 2 a dynasty, and they won 3 titles in a row, during what would be considered an easier time period. Well, if 100 Thieves comes out, they win Miami, then they've won 3. Plus, they look on to go and win champs. That's like 4 titles in a row. It's a championship victory. For me, they check off most of the boxes in order to be compared to one of those. The question is, though, in terms of their run, would it be a dynasty, or are they looking like one? Is it too early to kind of call them one of those things, Paradox? Because I feel like personally, they're in a great position. They're looking good coming into Miami. Like you said, it's just a matter of the complacency kind of becoming a problem because they aren't really struggling in anything that's too outright. Plus, you have a ton of roster moves coming into Miami. Like, sure, you have a little bit of time in Pro League to work on those things, but for the most part, you're looking good in seeding. You're looking good because all these teams don't really know how to work with each other. Plus, you have the motivation of wanting to win champs. I feel like they're in a good spot, but what's your thoughts on this team moving forward, and your thoughts on them possibly being labeled a dynasty?
I feel like we might be in the same situation that we saw Ryzen last year. It was a fantastic team, had all the talent, they were winning events. You knew they were like easy conversation, if not like place first, place in like top 3. Obviously, that team didn't do too well at chance, but that's another story. But that's where we get with this 100 Thieves team. There are teams that we see that can go into this. If they continue this, they will be one of the best teams of all time. It's just, can they do it? And that's what I'm just waiting on with 100 Thieves. It's just, where do they place Miami? Where do they place that champs? If they come out, win Miami, I think we go a little bit higher. But if they come out, win Miami and champs, then I think they get slotted into that upper echelon of teams in Call of Duty history.
So you think that they're a dynasty then, if they win Miami and champs?
If they win Miami and champs, I wouldn't be upset with someone calling them a dynasty.
I agree. I'm definitely kind of right there with you. I think that it is, as of this moment, not one, because obviously back-to-back has been done by multiple teams in the past, but I think if they win Miami and then close it out by winning champs, I feel like they have to be put in the conversation. But, obviously franchising can kind of change things up, so we'll kind of see where that fits. But Paradox, it's always great to catch up with you, my man. I appreciate you for coming on, and like I said, appreciate you for making the time and managing to get through the travel problems.
Thanks, I really appreciate it. Always love sitting down and talking to you. It's always a fantastic time. I can't wait to see where Roster Mania goes, man. We're in for an exciting close to the season.
We are indeed. Per sources, that's without question. But it's always great to catch up with you, Paradox. Thank you so much for joining us. But like I said, that's main observer and excellent commentator, Mr. Quentin, a.k.a. Paradox.